We're continuing. Last time we started looking at sort of more of a holistic version of a way to look at film noir from the perspective of, just sort of a listener and letting it sort of soak in. And now I want to get into the actual details of what, some of these guys were doing, because so much of it has to do with the jazz tradition. And so much has to do with what we talked about last year a bunch of times, which is as a composer, the your keyboard skills, and particularly your keyboard harmony skills, and your ability to sort of coalesce all your playing into the middle of the piano. You're going to see that a lot, and I think that obviously piano players, I always say this, they have the superpower, jazz piano players, because we sort of do this naturally. It's a little bit. I see Jeff nodding. What about trumpet players do too, if they have come up and played piano? And that's why, a lot of trombone players are great writers, because they're used to thinking in the middle of the register, with where all the meat of the chords are. And but a lot of this has to do with the way people conceive their writing on piano. And I was a classical pianist when I was a teenager. My great teacher, James Tannenbaum, we would be playing Chopin, and he would say, Chopin is speaking to you. He's telling you how to play this. He had a lot of notes where you play two notes with your thumb, and there are a lot of crazy intervals and a lot of dissonances, momentary dissonances. And he used to say, just let the music guide you. And there's always a line, there's always a resolution, and there's always a way to do it. There's nothing in Chopin that you cannot play physically, as opposed to, say, Brahms, who would, it's a little bit more challenging. It's not quite as pianistic. Am I right? Does any pianists out there? Right? So, I don't want to talk about classical music. Donald Fagen said the same thing. I interviewed him for a article in Keyboard Magazine about 15 years ago, and I said, "Well, what?" I had a piano there. I said, "Well, you do this in this tune, and what chord is this? What are you thinking about?" And he goes, "I'm not thinking about chords. I'm just thinking about structures, 3 notes, and a lower note, not necessarily a bass." He says, "I don't like to talk about chords. People always ask me, what's that chord? Is your mu major, your special add 9 Steely Dan chord? Is that it?" And he goes, "Oh, I hate that word. Someone said that. I never said mu major. I was just looking for a way to not use a major 7th in a pop song. I wanted to expand the major triad with something, add something. The 6th sounds too corny. The major 7th sounds too sweet. So I just added the 2, but it didn't come from thinking, oh, I want to add the 2. It came from looking at the piano and where he was playing these songs. So his linear style evolved. So the focus of this class is going to be, we're not going to talk about chord changes. We're not going to even talk about chords. Barry Harris says, jazz players don't play 2/5s. They play movement from one chord to the other. And it's not even movement from one chord to the other, it's movement from one moment to the other in music. So it could be one chord that moves within itself. And when we talk about linear harmony and chromatic harmony, there are a lot of things where one thing will be static and other things will be moving around it, forming what seems to be chords, but some of them which are indescribable. And it just so happens that the coalescence of European orchestra music and jazz in the 40s and 50s and 60s informed all these great composers, including, we're talking from Leonard Bernstein to Elmer Bernstein to Bernard Herrmann, and all these great composers were heavily influenced by chromatic jazz harmony, and they were able to incorporate this into more of a linear classical style. You'll see that a lot of times we're going to see how they took jazz harmony and were really, with the upper partials and the upper extensions, were able to play around with these structures above things that other classical composers maybe were a little afraid to get to or didn't have the ears for. But jazz harmony is the root of this sort of linear concept of the music in the 50s, I believe. And when you listen to this music and you actually look at how it's written, you can almost see them at the piano hammering out these moving things, these moving structures. So.